All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the September 6th, 2020 Abington Finance Committee meeting. We are meeting again tonight on Zoom. We have a good representation of our committee with us. We have our town manager, Scott Lambiase. We have our, I was about to say town accountant, but our town accountant has a new title, and I am scrambling to find our town accountant's new title before I say town accountant.
So our finance director, assistant town manager.
Yes, assistant town manager and finance director, Sue Moquin, and congratulations on the new title to Sue. And we have our fire chief, Chief John Nuttall. Thank you for joining us, Chief. Tonight we have a quicker agenda than we had 2 weeks ago. A few less things on it this time. I think we'll probably skip liaison assignments again, as we're only 6 of the 9 of us here. If Chris or Sean join later, maybe we'll end with that. But if they don't, then I think we'll wait until we have 7
I don't think everybody received the link because I was scrambling, texting you, Sean, and Greg trying to get it. And I know
I emailed it out late during the day today, and Katie, I think I haven't updated my group on my email contacts with your additional email, with your newer email.
Oh, okay.
I know that I forwarded it 2 weeks ago, but I think that I forgot to this time. So I apologize for that.
I'll forgive you.
That's to remove you from the list, Katie.
Yeah, I blame Greg. He's out to get you.
Those damn neighbors.
But on our agenda, we do have the review of the warrant for the fall special town meeting, which will be October the 23rd?
19th.
19th. I don't know why the 23rd was in my head, but October 19th, so just over a month away. And we are reviewing a reserve fund transfer request, potentially, if we have numbers on that yet. Scott or Sue, why don't we start with that, since that is the easiest, and we should be able to move that out of the way fairly quickly. Do we have numbers yet?
So I have preliminary numbers. The Plymouth County Cares is trying not to cover a couple of huge items. One is some salaries that we didn't furlough people, and they would cover, if we furloughed, they would cover unemployment costs, but they're trying to say that they don't cover for them to stay home and not work. So I'm trying to argue that point with them, and I'm hoping to be successful. And also a bus contract that we had to pay even though we weren't using the services. And if the buses and the drivers were our buses and we furloughed them, they'd pay for it. So why wouldn't they pay for a loss in having to pay for a contract that we weren't using the services for? So I'm trying to recoup some of that, but because it is the end of the year, I'd like you to at least to take a preliminary vote that if I can't get them to agree to my terms, that between those two, it's 115 for the bus contract and about 172,000 for the salaries, and then another 16 of various little things that they didn't approve. So it's a total of $294,000 that they're saying that they're not going to approve of the $900,000 that I sent in. But I am going to argue diligently my point, and hopefully they can see my what I'm getting at.
So, and just to be clear, and I this is my forgetting and messing up the wording of it. This is being handled essentially as a year-end transfer, not a reserve fund request.
Correct. It's a year-end transfer. We have money in long-term debt because we didn't have the opportunity to do a reborrowing. There's $277,000 in there, and there's money in the liability account which is another close to 75,000. So between the long-term debt and the liability account, we can cover that if Plymouth Cares doesn't. If we don't make some sort of adjustment for it tonight, then we'll have to take a vote at town meeting to use stabilization for it when we already have it in FY20 money, or it will have to be raised on the tax burden of the town when we set the tax rate.
So my question first to the committee is, does everyone understand what we're talking about, what Sue is proposing here?
Yes, I do.
Yes. Can I ask a quick question?
Yes, Greg.
If we vote no, will that help you, Sue?
I'm sorry?
If we vote no on the bus thing, will that help?
No, because Plymouth County Care doesn't care what you guys vote, yes or no. I just want it contingent, just in case. I sent them all the paperwork back today with my explanation of why I feel that it should be covered under the Plymouth County Cares. So if they come back with to me like a week from now and say, nope, don't agree with you, then we need to have that vote to cover these expenses, or it will be on the recap or the annual town meeting. Special town meeting.
I would also love to lend my services if possible.
I didn't hear what he said.
We would love to assist in making phone calls on the town's behalf in that regard, if it's
That would be
necessary.
great.
If you needed it. Not saying you can't do it, but if you needed it.
I sent it via their request for the questions, and answered what I thought was right. But I also did place an email to Tom O'Brien, the treasurer with the Plymouth County Treasurer's Office, and I'm waiting to hear back from him on his thoughts on my ideas.
We have a meeting scheduled or a conference with them on Monday also. So hopefully we'll get some sort of an update then.
Are there any other questions or comments or discussion on the discussion of a year-end transfer for covering money that may not be covered under the CARES Act or may not be reimbursed under the CARES Act? Without that, are there any motions regarding this?
My only,
Motion.
sorry, I was just quick. My only thing was just to, and not to hurt Sue, but just to push it to the next time. I think giving her the leverage of not voting on it, I don't know how it helps. That's all my only statement.
I personally wouldn't tell them that we voted on it. I'm just waiting to hear their response. So if you want to put it off another week, if you guys are going to meet next week, then I'm willing to hopefully get a response back from them by the end of, or by the time you guys meet again next week.
The only
It's also holding up the fact that I can't close my books for June 30th of 2020 until I know for sure they're either going to reimburse us or we're going to cover it through expenses that weren't used in fiscal year 2020.
So Sue, if we voted for the transfer now, and then it was in fact, they do in fact agree to reimburse it, it would essentially be no different depending on like which account or which line the money is in as far as closing the books, correct?
Correct. And if you voted on it and, they get back to me on Friday, and if you, like, let's say you don't have a meeting next Wednesday and you're waiting 2 weeks and they get back to me before you have another meeting and they say no, then I already have the vote. I can make the adjustments. I can close the books. If they say yes, I don't transfer the money. You guys can make it contingent on the results of the Plymouth County Cares.
So my point in what I was asking was, if we leave the money in long-term debt and liability, and the money does not get spent, it's the same as far as balancing the books and applying for free cash is concerned as if we transfer it and it doesn't get spent.
Correct. So it will be free cash. So if I can close my books and you guys don't want to make this approval, you want to wait to see what they say, then it's going to have to be stabilization, but it will be that vote will have to be on the special town meeting in October, because we were not going to have another town meeting before we set the tax rate. So it would have to be made before the tax rate is set. So you can hold off on it if you want, and I'll just close my books, but then you'll have to take it out of stabilization.
Does holding off on it hurt you at all?
Will it hurt me at all? No. I mean, we're either taking it out of free cash going forward into FY21, or we're taking it out of stabilization. So our free cash is either going to be higher, and our stabilization is going to be lower, or our free cash will be lower and our stabilization will be left alone. So to me, it doesn't matter either way.
So I would think the only,
you have to make
Sue,
a vote by
yeah,
October.
so I would think that the only place where it would impact you in a potentially negative way is if you find out in the next couple of days before we have another meeting that they either are for sure or are not for sure going to reimburse. You would be able to close the books. Whereas if we don't transfer it, you wouldn't, and they say they're not going to reimburse, you would not be able to close the books.
Right. I mean, I agree with that.
Right. Or I could close them, but then it will come out of stabilization at the town meeting in October.
And I think
It would
in
be an
general,
additional
at least my preference would be to not have to go and take it out of stabilization.
Yeah.
I don't know about anybody else's preference on that.
That's exactly what I was thinking as well. I feel like if we could just, vote contingent, do the contingent vote on this year-end transfer tonight, or, to word this such, then it lets, I agree with both points. Yeah, I think I would move to, I would propose that we do that tonight as well, unless there's not any further discussion.
Any further discussion? Greg, anything more?
No, I mean, if it's gonna get paid no matter what, then I don't know. If we didn't use something, I don't know how somebody's expecting us to pay something. Especially for municipal buses, I'm assuming these are. Is it buses for like kids?
It's the school bus contract.
Yes.
And yeah, they want to get paid.
I mean, they're definitely going to take a pay cut out of it, no matter what. So I would say if they're not taking at least a 50% pay cut, then don't pay it. That would be my answer to them right off the rip. The reason why is because they didn't.
Well, our responsibility would be to pay it, and if we want to argue it, then we'd have to get legal involved in it. But in the meantime, we really want to close the books.
So you're saying we have to pay something that they didn't do?
We're in contract with them, so that in the contract says whether we use them or not, we need to pay them.
And we sign contracts like that?
I didn't.
Also keeping in mind, I don't think there was ever a thought in anybody's mind that we would have an extended period like this, that
Exactly.
we would not have to, use the services of
My guess is that
We didn't lay them off when we knew the school year wasn't resuming, just out of curiosity.
well, first of all, I don't manage the contract, so I'm really not sure that was even an option. But they did start the school year. They are using them. I think it was for the period of time when they had to suddenly close the schools. So it's not the contract going forward. It's this past bill from when they suddenly closed and they didn't know when they were going to reopen.
Yeah, that's the only period that I'm talking about. Whatever period they didn't.
Yeah, so we're talking about March to June.
Yeah, so the period in which they didn't put gas into a bus and drive it around and pick kids up. That's the argument that I would give them. I wouldn't say that you don't, I mean, every business needs funds at this point, but I don't know about 100% of the funds. That sounds.
Yeah, I think
I don't know that this represents 100% of the funds either, Sue. I'm not so sure that.
You know what it does, Sue?
Again, it's a school contract, so I don't.
So I would say if the legal thing could look at it, because there are all different clauses in contracts, especially for them to get out of them, for force majeure, all different things. I mean, I deal with them every single day. So there has to be something in there that allows both parties to.
I assure you that the school department absolutely would have looked into everything in any chance. And I'll be happy to follow up with Felicia over there, but there's no doubt in my mind that if there was any way that they could avoid paying this, they wouldn't pay it. But
They did. work
again, I'll
with
be
the
happy to
company.
follow up.
And I don't mean to give more work to you, but maybe we could just ask Felicia to weigh in on it. I mean, again,
They did work with the bus company, and there were some charges that were reduced.
okay.
But they couldn't come to an agreement where they could reduce all of the charges. But so it would have been a bigger bill than that. But that's the best they can come up with. I don't know if they got legal counsel involved or not, but Felicia and other school districts that use that same bus company all came to the same agreement as to what they were not paying for, and hoping that the CARES Act would pay for the difference.
Got it. That information might be a little bit helpful also, just knowing that, to say we owed $1 million and they're charging us $100,000, you know, obviously that's very reasonable. That's why I said the 50% thing. Like, I don't even know the numbers. So
I can get them from Felicia.
thanks, Sue.
My guess will be that given the experience that we have had over the last 6 months, future contracts will probably have a clause that takes care of situations like this in them. Protects the town. Anything further? Is there a motion?
Are we in agreement that we should, are we done with this discussion so that I could make the motion?
Yeah, I think so,
Sounds
Russ.
like-
Yeah.
Okay. Motion to approve the year-end transfer for the, this is for the school bus contract?
It's for
Reimbursable costs from COVID, not just the school bus. There's other things involved in that.
Okay, motion to approve the year-end transfer for the unreimbursable COVID-related funds.
Not to completely derail this, but what other things are involved in it? I thought it was just the school bus.
So like I said, there's some salary questions about people that were not able to work from home, but town halls, sewer department, DPW, you know, certain clerical positions, and were not able to come to work, but they do not have access to work remotely. So the town paid them to stay home rather than put them on unemployment and jeopardize them losing their health insurance or their retirements. And apparently those are not covered unless the employees took sick time, but employees don't have 4 or 5 months worth of sick time to use. So the money was in the budget, we paid the employees. So we either put it back in the budget and you know, it is what it is, or Plymouth County Cares may reimburse us. So I'm working to try to get Plymouth County Cares to reimburse us. So they would have reimbursed us if they were on unemployment, which doesn't, like, what difference does it make? One batch of money or another batch of money?
So just out of curiosity, if they were unable to work, but they needed to keep their health benefits, how come they weren't furloughed so they could collect unemployment but still keep their health benefits? Because I thought if they were furloughed, the town can continue with their health benefits, or any employer can continue.
The unemployment cost that the Plymouth County Cares would have had to pay would have been well beyond what those employees make, because they were getting the extra $600 a week plus their you know, let's say it's 350 plus the 600. So they were getting over $800. It was less for us to pay for them to stay home than it was to pay for unemployment cost. And it wasn't like, you know, it was a decision made by the management at the time that it was more economical not to pay that kind of money to unemployment.
Even just thinking about I mean, not thinking about economics, but just, I'm trying not to be rude, but like, that doesn't sound good anywhere to say people don't have access to work, but we're still going to pay them.
Well, keep in mind that, and you know, I wasn't there when it initially closed up town hall, but shortly afterwards, we were doing everything we could to make sure that everybody could do their work remotely and then get everybody back to work as quickly as possible. And actually, we ended up, we opened town hall long before anybody or any other town opened up town hall, and we got people back in, but it was at staggered schedules. And it really, you know, we worked our way into almost 100% with everybody working back to work, and it's still following the guidelines that we have of the amount of people we can have in the building. So there was never any intention to have any long-term furlough at all. And our hopes obviously were just that somehow we were gonna all end up getting everybody back to work as soon as possible, which we actually did. I don't think there's anybody who's out there now that's getting paid that isn't coming to work.
So I guess for clarity, it was more being concerned about having an increased unemployment tax going forward versus paying the unemployment.
Well, I mean, you're going to pay if we pay him, if we put him on unemployment, we're paying their unemployment. But you know, ultimately, I'm thinking that initially the thought was, we don't know what we're doing. We have to close down and we're going to figure it out. So that's kind of when I came in. And then, you know, again, the decision there was that it doesn't make sense to lay people off. We knew we were coming back. We knew we were going to be back sooner than later. At least that was our hope. And I mean, so overall, it wasn't really, it was, I don't think I started in April. So, or actually I started in May, so it was maybe a month, and maybe the month before that. But yeah, overall, you know, financially, it probably wouldn't have been worth laying people off. We wouldn't have gotten them back too, probably at this point.
So I have a different question, if we're able to move off of that for a second, which is, if these were all people who were working for the town and we had budgeted for their positions in the FY20 budget, shouldn't we still have the money in the line items that existed for them initially so that we don't need a transfer?
Great point, Matt.
Yeah, the money is still in the individual budgets. I just thought it would be easier to plug it into two line items and take care of the whole COVID is not reimbursable thing into the two line items that we have the money, instead of saying, you know, so much out of the accounting line item, so much out of assessors, so much out of treasurers. I just figured it was easier to use these two line items to, in essence, make a couple of journal entries instead of a couple dozen journal entries.
This is going to be another terrible question, and I'm sorry in advance. Were these like jobs difficult to do? Like, how weren't people able to do these at their house? Is it like, meaning like people that couldn't go dig the streets up or something, fix the roads or something? Or what am I missing here?
So I know that Sue had said that some of them were DPW workers.
That makes sense. If there's nothing for the people to do, got it there.
Yeah.
So if that,
So
then that makes way more sense. Stuff like that. Is that all it was, really?
and I think, Sue, did you say library too? I think I heard.
Yes, library. When I say DPW, I meant the clerical staff. The office was closed.
So.
A lot of towns did the same thing we did and paid their employees because there was, like Scott said, there was an unknown as to how long this was going to happen. And I know a few communities that it wasn't until May or June that they actually started furloughing people.
So I think regardless of the decision that was made at the time, what we have in front of us is the need to figure out the finances for the sort of the aftermath of the decision, if that makes sense as the way to explain it, the impact of the decision. So Sue is looking for a transfer to cover all of the costs so that we only have to take it from two places instead of having to take it from everywhere that all of these people were covered previously in the budget.
And
But
then
the
that
money-
money that's in the line items, what happens with that? Just reconciled at the end of the fiscal year?
I imagine, and Sue, you can confirm that would be reconciled towards free cash at the end of the
That is correct.
when the budget is balanced.
That's correct.
Okay.
So essentially, we applied to Plymouth County for reimbursement for a close to $1 million worth of funds that we deemed COVID related. There's about 294,000 that they said no on, that we are contesting, but that if we have to pay, Sue is looking to pay for out of essentially one or two places rather than 20. Does that sum it up right? Is everyone good
Yes.
with that? All right, Russ, do you want to have another hack at the motion?
Sure. Motion to approve a year-end transfer for the COVID-related overspend, contingent on confirmation of what will actually be reimbursed through the CARES Act. Does that hopefully cover it?
I think that's
I'll second it.
fairly good wording. Motion on the table. Any further discussion on the motion? Giving Greg an opportunity here. Without any further discussion, all those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. All those opposed? All those abstaining? It is passed 4-2. Chief, I apologize. That was longer than I expected that to be.
No problem.
I think now we can head into warrant articles, and I think we start with the fire-related articles so that the chief can go back to his family for the rest of the night.
I have no problem doing this. You're all donating your time as well. So thank you for your time, everybody involved with this as well.
I quickly change my screen sharing so that we have the warrant up. Okay. And let's get down to the fire chief, which is much further.
I believe it's the first one's Article 18.
I was going to say it's much further down than it was 2 weeks ago. The planning board has hijacked the warrant on everybody. Lots of scrolling. Why don't we take Article 19 first, because I think that will be a quicker discussion.
And on both of these, I also emailed Sue. We had some conversations on this. There was a slight edit on the numbers on these. It's ultimately whatever Sue and the town manager and your committee suggest. But my suggestion is for Article 18, to reduce that to a total of 70,000 even for the entire project. And I'll explain why in a moment, and actually increase Article 19 by that $1,000, because on Article 19, this is requesting, it should be $11,000, which is the 5% town required match towards a FEMA grant for a total of $220,000 for a new forestry vehicle, which we were fortunate to be able to be awarded that by FEMA. We requested that. They're going to give us a total of $209,000 towards the 220. Abington would be responsible for the $11,000 grant match for this vehicle. If that's a possibility. If not, we'll find a way to
So
fund that internally.
I think I can summarize the questions that we had a couple of weeks ago.
Yep.
First was, do we have this type of vehicle already? The second was, do we have a place to put this vehicle? And third, I think, was interest in what the specifics of the vehicle are, the uses, the amount of training, any ancillary costs.
Excellent questions. We do have a vehicle now. It's old and it's tired. It does work. It is a 1992 chassis that was originally a U.S. Navy four-wheel drive ambulance, which we got from free of charge from surplus from the South Weymouth Naval Base when that closed. At the time, the Chief Whiting and the Abington Highway Maintenance Department converted that ambulance to a forestry unit. We saved the four-wheel drive chassis. We took the ambulance box, the patient compartment off. They put pretty much a utility body on it, and we slid a skid pump on that. And it's been very successful. We actually just replaced the entire skid pump unit about 3 years ago with remaining funds from another FEMA grant. We updated it. However, that's heavier. The chassis is getting tired, to be honest with you. It's a 1992 vehicle. It really does not meet any of the current NFPA requirements for a forestry vehicle. We can only fit 2 firefighters in it. Our goal would be to try to fit at least 4. If that's possible, we do have a few constraints lengthwise fitting that in the building, which we're not sure if we'll be able to, but you know, it's 1992 safety technology at the time, and it's Navy, so it's incredibly stripped down. It cost the town nothing for that vehicle, only what we put into it over those many years ago. We've saved a lot of money already on this. So the second question was, will it fit in the station? We're very cognizant of that, literally down to the inch. The Forest Fire Vehicle Committee, which we're forming that internally in the department to get the minds together to basically build this truck, because it'll be custom made for Abington. Every town's unique. We're not Plymouth or Carver, where they have very massive brush trucks. They literally push down trees. We don't have that requirement. We have much more just kind of wildland areas up in the state park, up in the National Grid right-of-ways. That's traditionally where we get fires, as well as people's backyards. This has to go on the road and be nimble enough to get into tight quarters. So we want to make sure that the vehicle fits in the bay, in the station. We have 25 feet, not 25 feet, 1 inch, 25 feet period, that this vehicle has to totally encompass to fit that. Height's not as much a restriction on this, although we actually would rather have this vehicle lower profile because it actually gets through the woods easier. Right now, the hose reel on the forest fire that we have is actually rather high, and we get entanglements with branches and like that. So we're looking to build a much more stronger, robust vehicle for our needs in Abington. And I think you're going to probably get 25 or 30 years out of this vehicle, realistically. Your third question was for training. The main training component we have on this, it's more of an OSHA component, which is new, is a vehicle operator course, which we have to do anyway. The town of Rockland also received a comparable grant they're going to be getting a new forest fire truck as well. And we're probably going to do some training on that together, or we at least be comparing vendors on that, or whatever policies and training procedures we come up with, we're probably going to mirror each other. So it's a great timing for both departments. These grants were written separately. Rockland got their grant prior to us. We got our award about a week later. I know Whitman's chomping at the bit. They're hoping they get one. Because realistically, whenever Abington has a fire in the state park, they're all coming to help us anyway. So I'm hoping they're successful as well.
Can I ask, is the grant up to 220? Meaning if you bought a vehicle for 150, that we'd only have to cover 10 or whatever, 5% of that? Or is it,
No, the grant is for 220. Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, the grant is for 220.
So you have to spend all of that on the fire truck, correct?
Most of it, yes. If there's any remainder, it's going to go for tools and equipment. But yeah, that's really what the grant is designed for.
Got it. Thanks.
I know that there was some discussion of, can we get a cheaper vehicle like that? Of course you can, but we really have to remain within the parameters of the grant. The grant was specific for a vehicle that we had designed theoretically to write for the grant, a vehicle that would work. That's what they awarded us for, and that really is what we have to stick with.
Seems to me that getting a custom vehicle for $220,000, and the town is on the hook for $11,000. That seems an incredible deal, and I think kudos to your the department for actually making this happen. I think this sounds like a great thing.
Agreed.
I agree, and I had two of our younger firefighters that actually requested the right to grant, and by all means I gave them permission to, really not expecting to win it, to be honest with you. This is the first vehicle that we have been awarded from FEMA. Vehicles are difficult to get. Certainly FEMA agreed with our needs, with the age of the vehicle, the safety concerns of the vehicle, and to be honest with you, and I mentioned this the other night, this was on my capital request plan to replace this vehicle, another year or two, and it probably would not have been a full 220. Realistically, it would have been at least $150,000 to $180,000. So that was going to be coming on the town capital request anyway. So this is a massive savings for the town. We're actually going to get a much better vehicle for it.
Yep, that's what it seems to be. So it's great.
Does anyone have any further questions about the forestry vehicle, Article 19?
Why can't we just figure out a way to build this thing for whatever the grant is?
Excuse me?
What do you mean, Greg?
How much is the grant for?
220.
How come we can't figure out how to build this thing for 220?
Because the town is on the hook
So
for 5% of the
Yeah.
grant. That is a stipulation. It's not like we're building over the grant. We have to spend that much in order to get the grant.
That's what I was asking. So no matter what, it's a 95-5 split.
Yes.
And we've had that on all of our past FEMA grants as well.
Yeah, no, I get
Yeah.
it. I have no idea. I've never even seen a FEMA grant. So that my point, the contingency for the grant is 95-5, no matter what the cost is.
Yes.
Yep.
Any further discussion there? All right, let's move to the boilers.
All right, and I absolutely understand your questions on this. It's a big ticket item, but it's needed, and there's a reason why it's needed now. Do you have any questions first, or do you just want me to try to explain?
So I think to again try to summarize what our discussions were last week, or 2 weeks ago, sorry. I think the questions were, what have we spent in repairs? How long, what do we expect the timetable to be if we are successful in building a new fire station? And is this another thing that was on the capital plan for at some point in the near future?
Yeah, absolutely. Valid questions, and I'm prepared for those as well. So last year, we spent a total of $3,000 $988 on emergency repairs. That's in addition to the regular maintenance that we spend. You know, we have a maintenance agreement with a boiler contractor that comes out and takes care of it. These were just the emergency repairs. This is rather typical. These are old boilers. I'm going to get into beyond the money on this. Really, it's going to be a question of reliability, especially during the pandemic. And that's really the main concern we have now. We spent a total of $11,686 on gas for heating for both stations. I've been told by numerous manufacturers, we're probably looking at a minimum of 30% savings on that, if not 40%, because the newer boilers are just much more efficient. Long term, it would pay for itself. I'm going to get into the question of, well, how long do we hope to be here? We'd love to have a new station. We don't know. There's a lot of ifs with that. The town would have to vote for that. There's a lot of ifs if that's going to happen. And then it gets into when. In a perfect world, let's say that we had a ballot, a warrant article in this town meeting, which we do not, for a new fire station, and the town agreed for it. We got a green light. We're still looking at realistically a minimum of 3, possibly 4 years before that building would be constructed for us to move in. That's a minimum. So we're looking at a minimum. We're still in these 2 stations 3 or 4 years. It could be much longer if the town decides ultimately that now may not be the time to go for a new fire station. I can't control that. We're here for the next 3 or 4 years, one way or the other. And every year we average both stations having the burners go down. They're old. They were originally oil-fired burners, I believe. I know Station 1 was, I think Station 2 is as well. A number, 18 years ago, maybe 20 years ago, they were converted to gas. I'm paraphrasing this, but that's probably the ballpark. They're old. They're original to the buildings. We do maintain them. They just tend to break. It's like having an old car. It runs, you put money into it, you change the oil, you maintain it, things happen. The carburetor goes, the battery goes, whatever. We're having more difficulties finding parts for these boilers. We do have a company that does a great job maintaining them, and we've been fortunate that they have had some spare parts literally down in the basement of their shop. That's what happened early this late winter, early spring, the last time it broke. We typically see both of these break down once or twice a year in the winters at both stations, and they come out, they'll do an emergency repair. However, the time it takes to make the repair, the heat in the building starts to go away. We are essential employees. We cannot work remote. There is always somebody at these stations. We have to be here. We have to heat the building for the employees and for the equipment. Now, my concern this year going forward is I really don't want to ask my employees, again, to stop putting on they're literally wearing their winter coats in the building, because sometimes it can take 12 to 24 hours to get the heat back on, because it takes a long time to cool down. By the time the boiler repair crews show up, sometimes they have to go back to get the part. We're talking time. These are not efficient buildings. These are not tight buildings. Every time we open the bay doors to go out for an emergency call, the heat goes with it. And if the heat is not on, it's not getting replaced. The building gets cold very quickly. The apparatus floors immediately cool down. We have very expensive trucks full of water and other medical equipment in those bays that very quickly drop well below certainly room temperature, down into the 40s and even colder at times. Now we have a real risk of freezing very expensive equipment. The living quarters begin to follow the heat loss right after that. If you've seen the stations, we're literally adjacent to the apparatus bays in both stations. The heat begins to go out. The employees start putting on winter coats while they're here 24 hours a day. We cannot do that anymore. We're in the pandemic, and our goal is to keep everybody from getting any kind of sickness. This is something we really have to avoid. That really is the trigger for me requesting this right now. I really can't keep asking the employees to try to just suck it up for another 12 or 24 hours till the heat comes on, hopefully, in the middle of a pandemic. Because the other problem that exacerbates with this is if we go into another lockdown, if the governor orders another lockdown over the winter or the fall, that may slow down the ability for the heating repair companies to come in a timely manner. Now it's actually an emergency if there's no heat in the buildings. We have to get ahead of this. That's really the main reason that I'm trying to get ahead of this now to get this solved. A new burner at both buildings, what I'm being told by the manufacturers and the service people, the service people said we're probably going to see them once a year on a simple service, as opposed to sometimes it's every other weekend or every weekend throughout the winters as we're trying to keep these going. Was discovered during the feasibility study just how inefficient these are, but really it's the pandemic that the conditions we're in, and I'm not trying to hide behind that, but it's a reality. We can't keep asking our employees to work in unheated town buildings. We have no ability to work remotely. We have to be here with the equipment to keep everybody else safe in town. We have to protect the employees.
Chief, thank you. I do have a quick question. So the cost that we have here, the 71,500, is that for, sort of a minimum type of system, or is it, is it kind of the best or the middle or the worst? I'm just trying to get a sense, because what I would be ashamed is if we put a really nice system in both of them and then they get, we move to a new station in a couple of years and now all that's sort of lost money. So I was just curious about.
Excellent question. And I'm glad you brought this up, because we don't want to have a repeat of, we put some money into other buildings and then move forward at other buildings. This is different. First of all, we're definitely here for the next 3 or 4 years, if not longer. The second thing is the entire project, I'm requesting 70,000 because we're averaging 30-something thousand per station, per burner. These burners, these boilers, they're larger than a residential one. They're not as large as the schools. The schools basically have locomotives down in the boiler rooms in those buildings. We're in between, so these are large units. They're roughly $30,000 each. I have a little extra in here because the quotes that I'm receiving do not cover asbestos abatement. We do know Station 2 has some asbestos that was seen and discovered during the feasibility study that's adjacent to the boiler that will have to be taken care of when we do this. We don't know what we're going to find inside. The feasibility study really didn't break open the boilers, so I have to have some reserve just in case they discover something that we have to take care of. I want to make sure that there's enough funding to make this project through completion, because once we start this, we're going to be in the winter months, assuming we're able to do it. They're typical boilers, burners. They're modern burners. I believe they're just typical what a modern fire station has. 2 of the vendors that came in to give us the quotes have done work in recent fire departments in the area in newer buildings. So this is kind of the standard what is out there, I believe. The topic of how many years are we going to get out of this? And it's an excellent question. Even if, let's say we're in these buildings for 3 or 4 years and then somehow we're able to get a new one. The goal, I believe, for the town would be at that point to try to sell both of these fire stations as surplus. I think, if anything, it would be just maintaining or increasing the value of these buildings to whoever would want to purchase them at the time if they know that the heating systems have been replaced. So I think it's still worth the effort to do this.
Thanks.
Yeah, I wasn't able to attend the last session, but I had a chance to watch it. And that's what I heard too, is that, it's not necessarily money lost. Of course, over 3 or 4 years, the value that you put into it goes down, but you could use that as a leverage for, not a leverage, but it would increase the value if you're trying to sell it, right? To know that there's, virtually brand new burners in there.
And I think one of the other questions you had too, that I just remembered is, just forgot, I apologize. Was this going to be in my capital request? It actually was, as the feasibility study pointed this out, just how inefficient they were. This actually would have been on one of my capital requests coming up. Sometimes there's a priority list with the capital request, and right, the priority really has been the fire apparatus and larger equipment as we've gone. We're really caught up on a lot of that. As you know, a couple of years ago, we replaced the emergency generators at both stations. Out of my own internal maintenance budget, I've replaced both of the massive air compressors at both stations. We did that about 8 years ago. We replaced air compressors from the 1950s that were beginning to fail the state inspections on that. We've come a long way with maintaining these buildings. The boilers really are kind of the last component to just kind of, maintain the building to keep things going. We've done a lot of work keeping everything up and running because, like I said, I understand that we're certainly trying to get a new fire station. I do hope that's successful at some point. In the meantime, we still have to be here, and that need really is now.
Further questions for the chief?
One other item on this too, and I had a conversation with Sue last week on this, was what is the possibility of funding this from the CARES Act, the COVID fund? Because that really is one of the things that's pushing it. After talking to Sue, and you saw how your meeting began, where a lot of questions on the COVID expensive that have been submitted, I would not feel comfortable doing that. Even though there's certainly an argument, I think, that could be made for this, I don't believe we'd be successful with that. I don't know if that's really worth the risk. Sue may be agreeing with me, but I think they're going to have a further discussion with the county to kind of see if that was it. But really, the feedback I'm getting back just from some of the questions we've had on the submittals for that account already, I'm guessing this probably would not be the way to fund that. So.
Okay. Anyone else with questions? Greg, you're awfully quiet.
I am.
I do think one of the other questions that had come up and was admittedly, by I think us even asking it, we knew that it was probably not a likely scenario, but it was if we were to put the new boilers in and then were to essentially quickly turn around to build a new station, would there be any way to sort of retrofit these new boilers into the building of a new station?
I don't know if legally you can do that. Meaning, if you buy a house, there's minimum equipment I think that is supposed to be in the house. I'm not sure commercial properties if that's the same. I think you'd be drastically reducing the value of these buildings if they came without heat.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I'm not a realtor.
Was the question just that we would take the boilers and move them to the new building?
That was something we discussed last time around.
Yeah, no, all right. So yeah, that's
very,
gonna work.
very, very questionable.
Yeah.
But it was raised,
definitely
so I
couldn't work.
wanted to make sure that we addressed it. So,
Matt, I think the main issue on that would be a new building would be combining, it would be a much larger building. Essentially,
Yeah.
you're combining the spaces of both of these. These burners would not be large enough, I don't think, for a building of that size. I think the engineering would prove that these burners would simply not work with a larger building. In fact, they're not the same boiler for each station. Station 2 is a little smaller. It's based on the BTU output that's required to heat these buildings.
Yep. And as I said, it was not something, it was something that was raised. I don't think it was something raised super seriously, but I just wanted to make sure that
It's a good question. Absolutely. Yep.
So, and I know typically if we have a question, someone else in town has that question. So.
My goal on this is to keep the firefighters and the employees here safe. I'm trying to keep the employees and the equipment safe and warm. Now so more than ever, to be honest with you.
And I do think that one of the points that is not often is not immediately thought of is the issue of opening the bay doors and how much heat you lose when those bay doors get opened. And like if you think about opening a window or your door at home in the middle of the winter, it's very different than one of the bay doors in the fire station. And your home door will create a heck of a draft when you open it up. So.
And not only that, as the trucks move out or the ambulances move out, we're actually sucking all of that air out with it.
Yeah.
There's anybody that stands on the platforms of the MBTA, you feel the wind as that train is coming.
Yep.
It's the same thing with a truck coming and going. We're completely evacuating the airspace in these bays when we're coming and going in the wintertime. You can feel it. And it takes a while to reheat that space. That's with the burner working. So you can imagine if the boilers are offline, how quickly we lose the heat in these buildings.
And so just for the financial side of it, just to reconfirm, you had said that last year the emergency repairs bill was, I think it was 3.3, like 3,900 approximately.
Correct.
What's the typical non-emergency service bill for those? Do you know?
The regular service, I don't have that, and I apologize. I was looking up the emergency ones, which was the request. We do spend. I wish my assistant was here. She's not, because she don't know right off the top of her head. It's in the hundreds. To be honest, it's not the thousands. The service on it is in the hundreds.
Yep.
Really, we're spending much more money in the emergency repairs on that. Murphy's Law kicks in. It's always on a weekend. Last time it was New Year's, so now you get the holiday, so we're paying more for that. I believe every weekend or, every winter, we play Russian roulette with when is my phone going to ring that the station said they've lost the heat again. And they're old. It's maddening. We do put money into them. We do maintain them. It's just, we don't run them in the summertime. Otherwise, they'd be breaking in the summertime. The new boilers actually run year round. They're more efficient. And it also avoids, if there's any issues, they're going to find out about it sooner. It's a whole different technology that they're using. It's, we're looking at 1960s technology on both of these boilers as opposed to the modern technology. The new boilers are about the size of a suitcase as opposed to the front of a Mack truck. It's a whole different technology.
Yeah.
Are these heat pumps?
No. Everything's forced hot water. And I'm not an HVAC guy, so if I'm answering that wrong, I apologize. My idea of a heat pump is forced hot air, unless I'm wrong.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Okay. Yeah, both stations are forced hot water. And that's inefficient to begin with. That's the whole system beyond it. This is just a heating plant to make the heat. Once it goes out through the building, that's still inefficient. We can't solve that. That's one of the reasons we're trying to replace the stations. I just want to at least be able to make heat. And I think we're still going to save money on a much more efficient boiler on both stations to get this done.
Any other questions for the chief? All right, Chief, thank you very much for the time tonight. It's been very, very informative and very helpful.
Thank you, folks. As always, if there's any more questions, you can email me.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
All right, I will scroll back up to the top of the warrant. I think we can try to, I'm saying quickly, but it's taking me not quickly to just scroll up to the top of the warrant. Try to quickly run through where we're at, and just before we even start that, I'll say I believe we have to have our official recommendations. Is it 14 days before town meeting, Sue?
It has to be posted 14 days before town meeting.
Yep, so we have to have them by October 5th, which amazingly does not give us all that much time.
Hey, man, I had a couple of questions from a high level before we start, if you don't mind. I don't want to slow down anymore, but all right. So still being relatively new here, right? Trying to understand. So like there's like 20 plus articles on here. And so we don't normally have a second special town meeting, right? I mean, this is fairly new because, not new, but unique because of
This is,
COVID, right?
yes.
So like, would these have normally been deferred to
So-
the next town meeting?
So the planning board articles that take up a very large chunk of the warrant right now, and the street approval articles are all things that would have been on the May town meeting this year. But because of COVID, we stripped down that warrant to the bare minimum that we could strip it down to. So most of the things that are on here either are related to COVID and expenses that have come up, or monies that have come in since we found out about it, or are things that would have been on the warrant in May.
Okay, all right, that makes sense.
There might be one or two things that otherwise that don't fit in those categories, but that's the vast majority of what's on this warrant.
Okay, and then my second question is, I guess at extremely high level, right? Not to get bogged down to too many details, but what does the process look like in order to get from, an idea to an article, right? And the reason why I'm asking is because some of these seem extremely benign, right? Adding the definition of what a swimming pool is seems completely benign, right? But what happened to make somebody say it is really important that we get this definition in there? Because the underlying reason might be, I might be against saying, you know what, I don't want to define what a swimming pool is because of why you're asking to do it, and it's just not clear in these articles. Some of them are straightforward, right? But some of them like that, like what caused that to happen?
Well, that one's pretty simple. It just, the building code says one thing, and I think it's just housekeeping so that our
yeah, but I guess that was a specific, but I guess more non-specific. Like, is there like a process that says here's what we want to get on for an article, and here is the reason why, here is the impact if we don't do it, if we do it?
Yeah, well, some of them start off at the level, you can see if it was presented by the planning board. It could be something that was a petition by the planning board to do something. The accessory apartment one could have been something that started with another group, maybe the affordable housing group or something. But these things typically start with a group or an individual who'll gain some support, get a citizen's petition, or they'll ask the planning board or someone to take up the charge on it, and they'll bring it to the planning board, or they'll bring it to the Board of Selectmen, or they'll bring it to Sue and say, listen, we need to get an article to take care of this at a town meeting.
Sure.
And that, then some of them, if they're planning articles, then they get vetted and they have hearings, which are coming up actually with the planning board. Some of these had already gone through that process. With the planning board will hold hearings and discussions on it. The road acceptance articles, those are presented by the developers typically, and citizen petition of the people who actually live on those roads. Planning board has already had their hearings on that. The selectmen will also have hearings on it. So different articles are presented by different groups and in different ways.
Mm-hmm. So I guess maybe to kind of check for understanding. So if there was something on here that I saw that I'm like, oh, that just seems like I'd like to know more about that. It was likely covered in another department's meetings. I could always go back and look, but there's no like document per se that says, here is my request for this article with an explanation as to why.
Sometimes they will. Some of them will go into more depth than the others. But if you see that it's submitted by the planning board, then yeah, you could find minutes at a planning board hearing that would explain it. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Planning board meeting, or likely a Board of Selectmen meeting for the non-planning board items.
Okay. All right. That makes sense.
Would be where you would be able to find just about anything that will end up on the warrant.
Okay. I appreciate it. Thank you.
So I was trying to go past the planning board stuff to see what other groups we do see for the annual town meeting. We typically see both planning board and zoning board. If you see, we've got town manager, which goes through the Board of Selectmen as well. You see the Board of Health, so you could find information on that there. Fire chief, obviously, we talked about there.
Yeah, like some of the earlier ones that submitted by petition, right? So what is that?
So the petition would be a resident of the town makes a petition, and Sue or Scott, correct me if I'm wrong, but they make the petition to the Board of Selectmen to add something to the warrant. Is that correct?
Yeah,
Scott?
that's correct. So there's for an annual town meeting, if somebody wanted to put, and it could be anybody who wants to put an article on the warrant, if they can collect 10 signatures, they can come to the selectmen and say, hey, we need this to be on the warrant. Otherwise, I think myself or a committee or a planning board or whatever they can ask to have something on the warrant also. During a special town meeting, if somebody wanted to add something to the warrant, they would need 100 signatures. And again, they would put an article together and they would submit that to the Board of Selectmen.
Mm-hmm. And so what they submit to the selectmen, I'm assuming, is like an actual document of,
it would
or
get
just a
stamped in with the
conversation.
town clerk. No, it's not. It's an actual document.
Mm-hmm.
It would have an explanation of what they want, typically the wording like you would see there.
Mm-hmm. Is that sorry? So is that accessible to everyone else to read that document?
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, what you see in the article is what they've submitted. But yeah, it is a public document. So when they do come in, if you would ask, if town clerk would have a copy of it, it's stamped in and they keep a copy of it.
Gotcha. Okay.
But there wouldn't be a lot more information. Typically, more often than not, something like this, like a good example are the road acceptance ones. They're put together by an attorney who represents the group. And what you see is pretty boilerplate.
Yeah, because as I was going through these at the same time today, I think what triggered it is I was reading the Massachusetts voter question information, and it was, I would never have known what the rationale is and the detailed pro and con to these things without that pamphlet, right? Unless, of course, I was curious, I would look online. That makes sense. But so then it kind of got me wondering, hey, well, geez, how did this thing even get on here? And what was the rationale and what's the pro and against? So just trying to say, like, if I was curious enough, it sounds like there is a path to find out more information.
Yeah, and there's always hearings for all of them. Even the citizens petitions ones, the planning board will hold a hearing. So there's always opportunity for people to find out more.
All right, I appreciate it. I won't take up any more time.
Thanks, Joe. Good questions.
Yep.
Matt,
Yes, Sue.
my suggestion would be that you might want to have a couple of meetings and have your motions together by the end of next week, because we normally send them to council and council reviews them. Usually take a couple days. So if you want it posted by the 5th when it's supposed to be posted, we want to give council and myself enough time to put everything together for them.
Yeah, my suggestion was going to be that we go through them again tonight and that we provide our motions and our recommendations next week.
Okay.
Is that good with time frame by the rest of the board? I see just a few nods. Joe left, so he said his piece.
I can do next week if need be.
Good. All right, so going through them quickly. Article 1, as we discussed last meeting, is the Central Street Bridge, which for annual town meeting in May, we were told does not need to be done right away, and came back and turns out it does need to be done right away. So adding that back to the agenda, do we have any questions or comments there? And I'm guessing Joe didn't hear that since he was just putting his headphones back on.
Sorry, quick bio break.
Okay, plan is to run through the articles now, but provide our recommendations next week.
Yeah, that sounds good.
And Article 1 we discussed 2 weeks ago is the Central Street Bridge, which we were told before did not need to be done right away, and that got backtracked and does need to be done right away. Any discussion? Doesn't look like there's any. Articles 2, 3, and 4 are road acceptances, which are generally not something that the Finance Committee particularly weighs in on.
Yeah, and I'm sorry. So just, like 2-second definition. What does it mean to have a road acceptance?
So it means that the town is now responsible for the road. There's a new road, a new development, usually a new development, sometimes a road that the town built. But
Gotcha.
a new development that has been under the control of the developer or a private entity for however long it's been around. This puts it into the official roads. It goes on maps is one of the things that happens with this, but it also the town has to plow it.
Yeah, I was going to ask some things like, so without this or before this, I'm assuming someone else is responsible for plowing and I'm assuming road repair, right?
Yes.
And so like it seems straightforward, right? We're going to accept this road, but that obviously increased costs, right? And so are we accounting for that?
It does generally create a slight increase in costs.
Okay.
It also, and there's also a bit of an offset, because once you do accept the roads, your Chapter 90 money that you get in for road repair from the state is actually based on roadway miles.
Okay.
I would not be suggesting that it's enough to offset
Yeah.
fully, but it does increase that money that we do get.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Any other questions on the road acceptance articles 2, 3, and 4? All right. Articles 5 through 15 are planning board articles. They are mostly, as I read through them, they are mostly definition articles. Article 5, you have to have your address on your sign so that emergency vehicles can find you. Article 6, Joe mentioned already, defining what a swimming pool is.
Yeah, that one caught me like, why are we defining a swimming pool? To what extent do we need that definition?
Yeah.
But I mean, it makes sense, I guess. I'm still a little confused, but I think it's outside of our purview, right? I mean, there's no financial impact.
As best I could tell, all of these were outside of the purview of the Finance Committee. Sue or Scott, was there anything that you were aware of, or anyone else on the committee, anything that you read that you feel we should provide some sort of recommendation on? And actually it's 5 through 14, not through 15. 15
No, I would say defer it to the planning board.
Yeah, why would we even vote on these? Like it has nothing.
we have to provide some sort of statement, because the Finance Committee provides a statement on everything, but that statement on these will just be that we defer to the planning board.
Sounds
Because
good.
they're the experts and it's their purview, not ours. So Article 15 is the stormwater bylaw, which we talked about 2 weeks ago, but has a lot more detail now. And we have been voting for the MS4 money in the capital plan for adhering to the stormwater regulations. I think this is officially putting them into the bylaws and putting them on the books. Is that correct, Scott?
Yeah, correct. This is all part of that whole program that we've been paying lots of money for.
So there are things like the amounts of fines, like we can see on the screen right now. First violations shall be 100, second will be 200, third and each subsequent will be 300. But overall, this is not something that is a Finance Committee purview type of a thing as well.
Yeah, so just like, so if I was a citizen, right, and I was like, where would I hear the conversation about this, right? So again, is this just the planning board,
Planning board.
and then potentially the selectmen, right?
This one you would find almost all of the information you would need from the planning board. They had a lot of meetings on this. There'll be more information than you'll want, but yeah, that's where everything for this particular bylaw, especially anything that's going into a bylaw, you will, unless it's a general bylaw, but for these things, yeah, you'll find it with the planning board.
Gotcha. Okay.
I've heard that the planning board meets even more hours than we do.
I wouldn't be surprised based off of the
It's
people
not
that I
a-
know that have served on the planning board before. They definitely put their time in. Any other questions on Article 15 or discussion? Article 16, last time around, if you're looking at your notes from last time, was Article 5. This is the buyout for the police chief. Do we have any further discussion on Article 16? Okay, Article 17 is the article that moves a Board of Health employee from part-time to full-time temporarily.
So when I was listening last time, there was some talk about changing the language, right? So like, is this person going to be temporarily going to full-time, or
This
this
person
is
is going to
full-time?
be, yeah, this is going to end up being a full-time position for, and I don't see it, I don't see how it cannot be right now. The Board of Health, with the responsibilities that they have now, are having a hard time keeping up with everything. But on top of that, you know, we're running into a flu season. Again, we had to, we hired a public health nurse who's a part-time position last year to make up for the fact that we were no longer getting public health nurse services from outside. And that's going to require, we'll be responsible for doing all of the, or a lot of the flu vaccinations now. And this is expected to be a pretty hefty flu vaccination season. When the COVID vaccine does come out, that's going to be administered and will be, you know, the Board of Health is ultimately going to be responsible for setting up vaccination sites, and people are going to have to go through 2 rounds of that. And it's quite possible that come fall or winter of next year, if there's any sort of morphing of that, that they would have to go through it yet again. So between that and just, you know, some other issues that health related, well, Board of Health related, that we're dealing with, sort of piling onto that department. We're trying to, and I've been talking to Marty about this, and he's trying to work together a task force that's going to that could deal with potential issues that, or a lot of issues that we have with hoarding and stuff like that. So there's a lot of other things that we're also expecting this department to take care of, and you know, like I said, right now they're pretty low staffed. So
Yeah, I've been watching I've been watching the Board of Health meetings. So yeah, they definitely have their plates full. I was just wondering, you know, should we maybe clarify that this is to fully to fund a position from temporary or from part-time to full-time?
So at this point, because I think this will get us through, and Sue, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but this will get us through to the annual, and I think we can deal with it at the annual. That will, at that point, say, yeah, it's staying full time, and that's.
I think the wording of the article for the special town meeting would be intentionally worded towards fiscal year 21. And if we choose to increase this position to a full-time position in a more permanent status, that would be something that we would deal with in our budget discussions for fiscal year 22. But that was something that I thought of over the 2 weeks in between, where we're more in this particular article looking at from now through the end of fiscal year 21. And that's what this is in regards to. We don't have to, nor should we really be directing this towards future budgets.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think, like, if I was someone who's not, sitting here watching these every single finance committee meeting saying, oh, what's this temporary position, when really we're not looking to hire somebody, right? We're looking to make someone full-time.
And we did suggest in the meeting that it should be worded that we're raising a part-time position to full-time hours.
Correct. It's not
for
a
the
new
rest of the
Yeah.
year.
Like I said, someone watching this meeting will know that, but
Yeah.
come special town meeting, I don't know.
That would
Just thinking about, because I'm assuming similar to our last town meeting, you want to make it as short as possible, get in, vote, and get out. So
I think that would be good to have in the wording of the article itself. But whether it is or not, that can be in the wording of our
Mhm.
recommendation and our statement
yeah,
for
fair enough.
what we say. So
That's a good point too, Matt.
anything else on 17? Okay, Article 18 and 19 we already discussed. Anything further there? All right. Article 20, raise and appropriate or transfer available funds, $30,000 to pay the remaining balance for paving the senior center parking lot. We did talk about this last time, I believe. And I'm trying to find it in my notes from last meeting, and I'm not.
We didn't talk about it, Matt.
Okay.
I was going to say, I don't remember it. I thought we had enough. That estimate was wrong.
We put in $100,000, but when the contractors came out to actually do the senior center parking lot, it was supposed to be just to do a slight grading and an overcoat, but they felt that it wasn't going to be sufficient. And the DPW department also agreed that after a year of weather, it would start to crack all over again. So they actually graded the whole parking lot like they did over at the town hall, which ended up costing more money than was expected. So they wanted to get the job done. The contractors weren't going to do it if we wanted them to do a half-assed job. They didn't want their credibility to be ruined. So they agreed to go ahead and have them do the extra work. We haven't paid the bill yet. We're waiting for approval of this town meeting to say that, yeah, we're going to, again, it's not money that is coming from free cash or a budget of some sort. It's coming from that program income money that the last town meeting approved also. So there was still money left in there, and we either pay for it or with the program income money, or we have to find some other form of funding source. But there was no way that parking lot was going to get done for $100,000. They didn't do just the front of the parking lot. They did the sides as well.
I mean, so it sounds like they changed the scope of the work after we voted to approve the 100,000, right?
And the 100,000, I believe, was based on estimates given. Is that correct?
Yeah, John Stone had an estimate of like 90 to 100 or something like that.
Yeah, it was estimates, and the scope of the work was changed by discussion between DPW and the contractor, that what they estimated to just do the surface work was not going to be sufficient, and we would have to put more money into it 2 or 3 years down the road to repair it properly. Instead, it was decided by those parties to repair it properly the first time.
Yeah, and I guess to intentionally split hairs, right? I don't know if it was a scope of change per se from our standpoint. It sounds like it was misquoted. Is that fair to say?
Or they didn't.
They didn't see beyond the surface. They were looking at the surface. They were quoting the surface. They didn't see beyond the surface. Yeah. So when they started taking the surface out, it was not going to be feasible to just put a top coat on.
Gotcha.
So you're saying this gets paid with a grant and has no real effect on us at all?
It's technically not a grant, but it is money that we're getting from, it's a long, hard way to explain it. I can put it in writing and send it to you all about
No, I
how.
thought I remembered you telling us something about this, something about the doors and stuff, right?
Well, so we had a CDBG grant, which is Community Development Block Grant. We assisted low-income elderly in fixing their homes. We put a lien on their property, and if they sold their property before the 20-year lien, then when they sold their property, they owed the town back the prorated amount of that money, which goes into a fund called program income. If it's over $30,000, we have to use it for senior housing, senior centers, more CDBG stuff. And we have had money in there between this past year, there's $78,000 of money that people sold their house before the 20 years. We took the lien off, they paid their balance. So that money can be used towards other community development block grants or senior center, senior housing sort of assistance. So it's not necessarily a grant, it's a lien that's paid back to the town that we can use for the same purposes that the original grant was issued for. So the money is available to use. If we don't use the money, then it gets closed out to the general fund.
And then on top of that, we went over.
No,
We
so
went
that-
over the original estimate of the surface work because the surface work was not going to be sufficient to outlast.
I get it. You don't have to keep it. I understand. So
Thank you.
Yep. So it was 150 grand instead of 100 grand or whatever.
130 instead of 100, essentially. And so we need to take the other 30 out of the area of money that Sue was just discussing that we have available to use for Council on Aging type purposes. Not out of the general fund or out of the state aid money that we've been talking about. Any further questions there? All right. Moving on, we have another section of assessors articles. We are increasing exemptions by 200. These are all things that we talked about last time. They're essentially adjusting for inflation and cost of living, their amounts, or things that have not been adjusted in a very long time. And they are being adjusted for inflation. Do we have any questions or discussion on Articles 21, 22, 23, 24, and 25?
And Joe, if you wanted any
Sorry,
backup on any of that, you certainly would be able to find it in minutes of the Board of Assessors meetings.
Yeah, the only question I had, just to make sure I understand it correctly. So like 22 and 23, for example, right? We're making it better for the citizens, right? Because the level is higher. So people that were not once qualified now are.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Sounds
Yeah,
good.
making the threshold higher, but also really just making it more appropriately reflecting what the threshold was originally intended to be, because it hasn't been adjusted for inflation.
And so when it says things like general laws of Massachusetts, so at the state level, they've already done this, and we're just trying to align. Is that fair?
I believe that's correct.
Yeah, I'm sure whether the actual numbers might not be in the chapter, the ability to do what they're doing, and it probably reflects some sort of income level or something that these numbers do mirror.
Okay, sounds good.
Only because it would be very difficult to change a statute, so they typically don't put hard numbers like that into it. They would more be reflected in a regulation.
Yep.
Sounds good. And these take place these take place, looks like in a couple of years in some
They
cases.
take effect in fiscal year 22, which would be
21.
starting next July.
And then 24 is 21. Okay.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Any other questions there? Anyone? All right. Moving down to 26. This one is, we discussed 2 weeks ago, Strawberry Valley Golf Course. Looking for a greens machine. And Sue, I believe this is money coming from their accounts. It says raise, appropriate, or transfer available funds, but isn't it money that they?
Yes, it said something different in there, but the council had me put this wording, and they said they'll put that we need to put it in the motion that the money is coming from prior voted article town meetings, and so I'll let you know what those are when we're ready to do the motions.
Perfect.
But I think but like, because the golf course is self-sustaining, not knowing the correct term, right? So this is just really asking us to allow them to spend the money from their own account.
Exactly.
Correct.
Gotcha. Okay. So there's no burden to the taxpayer.
Correct. And this was Articles 16 and 17. When we went over this before, they were combined into Article 26. So it's one article. But yes, article money is coming from their fees and other money they collect themselves.
So just quick, so where they are self-sustaining, I forget what the correct term is, right? So so like why do they have to ask for this? Just to understand.
It's because they are in fact a town department. They can spend things based on what they budgeted at the beginning of the year, and these things are things that are over and above what they budgeted. So they have to come back and say, hey, we want to do that.
Gotcha.
They can't just revolve the money.
Okay, sounds good.
Anything else there, anyone? Article 27 is Article 27 was the portion of the state aid that is the higher than expected state aid that would go towards the schools. Anyone with any questions there, comments? We discussed this 2 weeks ago. We were kind of breaking up the state aid money that was over and above what we had budgeted for fiscal year 21. This would be the schools portion of that.
So would this be related to like COVID related expenses?
So
they weren't expecting?
So this is, if you recall, when we were doing the budget for fiscal year 21, we budgeted for a 10% decrease in state aid. Last meeting, we went through a lot of information because we got the numbers from state aid that they were matching last year. So we essentially had 10% more money from state aid than what we were expecting come in. We're taking about half of that to cover the lower than expected revenues. So fiscal year 20 revenues came in lower than what we expected them to. But we balanced fiscal year 20. It was not a concern for fiscal year 20, but looking at what we projected as revenues for fiscal year 21, we're essentially taking 600,000 of this extra state aid and pushing it to balance what we would not receive in local receipts based on what the estimates were. And then the other 600,000 we were breaking between the school department and various articles, and the school department did not itemize exactly how they were going to use it, but it was mostly for stuff that they cut out to try to meet that 10% down number. Anything further there? I think we'll probably have a longer discussion on that specific item next week. So, Article 28, This is a settlement for an injured employee. This is a legal requirement. The town has reached a settlement with an employee who was injured on the job in town. We have a requirement to pay the $22,000. Talked about that last week. Any questions there? Without any, Article 29 is, see, this is to set up an affordable housing trust fund bylaw. And note on this, yeah, this is essentially setting up an affordable housing trust. It's just creating it. It's not putting any money into it or anything in that regard. It's just setting it up. Any
Yeah,
questions?
actually, money was allocated for this at
That's
the
right.
annual, and we just didn't actually have a trust.
Yeah.
We allocated the money to.
Have to have a place to put the money that we allocated towards it. So this sets that up. Any questions? All right, Article 30 is to see if the town will vote to amend section 5-1-1 of the town charter relative to the appointment term for the police chief by striking the second sentence and replacing it with the following. There should be a police chief appointed by the town manager for such term as the parties mutually agree upon. Scott, what was in that section?
Yeah, I read that.
Yeah, the original
said-
language was for an indefinite period. So it you know.
This just makes it's still technically indefinite as far as the charter goes, but it sets who is setting the time period.
No, it will no longer be indefinite. It will be for such terms as the parties mutually agree on. So, it could be a 3, 5, 10-year contract. It depends.
Yeah, I was curious. I was curious too, because how I read indefinite was to be not defined, meaning it's over when it's over. But was this just driven by was this a legal suggestion, or just it felt like it would be better to clarify?
Yeah, no, the selectmen wanted it clarified. They felt as though the way it read, it would lead someone to believe that if somebody is appointed chief, that there would not be any ability to ever sever that relationship.
So, I gotcha.
And this, and it's not, it's typically, police chiefs, fire chiefs, especially strong chiefs that do have, provisions like that. And the intention is to avoid any sort of political interference in those positions. So, I'm not really sure where town meeting will go with it, but the idea here, it's not to do anything other than just offer up a contract. And if people decided to go their separate ways for a good reason at the end of that contract, they can.
It kind of felt like it kind of felt like a difference without a distinction, but I can see how someone could misread indefinite. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Any other discussion on Article 30, or as I'm looking at my screen now, the first Article 30?
Yeah, I was gonna say I'd never seen an article with emojis. I'm curious to hear about that one.
Also a duplicated article, duplicated number. It's a good thing this is, at least I think, I'm not 100% sure, but I think this is a draft.
I was questioning that until I saw that watermark just right now.
Yeah.
Right, it says draft.
Somewhere maybe.
But is that real though? Like, is there a potential we could have a reason to add?
No,
Nope,
you
so
guys.
that was what
just
we addressed at the start with the year-end transfer.
Okay, gotcha.
So with that addressed, there is no need for the second Article 30, the emoji Article 30.
So I'm not sure why I have so many questions this time, because just because I think it's just because I'm trying to learn, right? So like, can you just scroll up because some of those articles start with like a very similar verbiage, and I'm just trying to understand, again, being relatively new, what that means. Like
We'll
to
do on it
raise, yeah, to erase and
to raise and
appropriate or
appropriate.
borrow. Like
Yeah.
what does that mean? Like however we see fit. Like
I
does that
will-
include like increasing taxes or what does that mean? Like in real brief too, right? I don't want to hold us up.
I will let Sue, because that is very, very much in her wheelhouse, that specific wording.
Okay, so town council changed it that way because I did like raise and appropriate if I knew we were taking it from the state aid. I did transfer if I knew we were taking it from, like say that program income. But town council puts everything in there to raise, appropriate, transfer from available funds or borrow, so that you
Or
as
otherwise provide.
or otherwise provide so that
Yeah.
you as a finance committee can put in the motion exactly how we're funding it. Rather than I'm saying this is how we're funding it, it just adds more words to the article than what you had in the previous warrant that I gave you. And some of these things where he writes and to borrow, you can't borrow for settlement agreements. You can't borrow for a buyout agreement. So there's, in my opinion, there should be no reason for it to be there, but council made some adjustments and I just put what he wanted so that now, in essence, when you say your motion, you have to say it's going to be to raise and appropriate through state aid,
Gotcha.
or it's going to be to transfer from such and such a fund. So your motion's going to have to be longer than the way we worded it in the special was, it was in there and they said, you just had to motion to approve.
Yeah, and unfortunately, Matt just happened to land on the one in particular that I was more just curious about what that phrase meant. But so are you saying like when the finance committee makes their recommendation, and maybe I haven't been paying attention last time, but they're specifically saying which one of these options we're choosing?
Right, you have to say where you're funding this from. Are you borrowing? Are you
Gotcha.
are you raising and appropriate? If you say raise and appropriate, we obviously know it either means from taxation, state aid, or local receipts. So it in essence, your motion has to be more detailed than it did at the annual and the special in June.
Mm-hmm. But Matt, do we so just taking and under normal circumstances, do we? And again, I apologize if I haven't been paying that close attention. But like when you're making that recommendation, do you pick one of these?
Yes. So when we keep this wording so that it keeps all of the options, or it states all of the options of how we're going to deal with how we would deal with providing the funds.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the motion that I make at town meeting, the motion I read at town meeting, it states the specifics.
Gotcha. Okay.
So often it will be like that the town will borrow the sum of XYZ, or the town will appropriate from like such and such source.
Mm-hmm.
Like especially at the special town meeting ones where we're moving money from one thing to another, it's typically like it's providing the very specific source of the money in the motion, but the article itself provides the flexibility.
Okay.
The possibilities.
Makes sense. Thank you again.
Anyone else? Anything else on the whole warrant? All right, have your boxing gloves for next week.
It's gonna just be simple, right? Go right through it.
We should go through most of it pretty simply. I think there might be some that might not go so quick. And that takes us through the warrant. I will pop out of that share. Let me look back at my agenda. Definitely going to skip liaison assignments right now. Do we have any liaison reports? I see heads shaking no. We do have minutes. I'm actually going to, based on attendance, I'm going to hold off on review of the minutes until next week. We don't have any correspondence. Our next meeting will be next Wednesday, September 23rd at 7 p.m. I will ask once again, do people prefer to continue to meet on Zoom, or would you prefer to go into town hall to meet? I know other committees or boards have been meeting in town hall, so it is open as a possibility. It does not matter much to me either way personally, but I want to put it out there to you guys.
Motion to meet
I
on
prefer
Zoom.
Zoom to limit exposure.
Same.
I want to try to get as much exposure as I can, Matt.
Greg, I'll drop off a nasal swab tomorrow. You can rub it on
Thank
your
you.
body.
Can you do it tonight?
Yeah, I have a couple.
Thank you.
Katie, are you dropping off to Greg? Greg wants exposure. Are you dropping off a used nasal?
Yeah, a positive one.
Okay.
Yay.
That's against the law. It's against the rules. I don't really have any. I'm kidding. It's a joke.
I think it's wise to state that, considering we are being recorded. However, I don't think that anyone considered that you were actually serious there. So I think
That is a bold assumption there, Matt.
well, I think Katie's performance over the years has earned her enough reputation to have people not assume that of her. So,
Pretty good chance I'm going to file a complaint.
I think Greg's performance over the years has also allowed people to understand the leeway that Katie needs to be given when dealing with him. So with that said, unless there are any other points of discussion, I would entertain motions.
Motion to adjourn.
I
A
hear
second.
adjourn and a second. And I'm going to just note that it was Russ and Joe.
Matt, so is it my job to do the meeting minutes? Is that what it works for the secretary?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so what I'll end up doing is just rewatching this when it's posted, and I'll draw them up.
Oh, that'd be perfect.
Okay.
Thanks, Joe. So we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on it? Without any, all those in favor of adjourning? All those opposed? Abstaining? It is unanimous. We are adjourning. Thank you.